The transport ship slowly came to a stop above the brown planet. Inside the cargo bay, 12 beings from different worlds stood ready. Each one looked different from the others. Some had scales, some had fur, and some looked like walking crystals. Jay stood near the wall, checking his plain gray clothes one last time. He was the only human on this mission. The other 11 creatures were much bigger or much stronger than him. Some had sharp claws that could cut through metal. Others had thick skin that could stop bullets. Jay only had his hands and his brain. The ship's computer spoke in a cold voice. "Welcome to the Pure Survival Challenge. You will be dropped on planet Keth 7. You may not bring any tools, weapons, or shelter materials. You have only the clothes you wear now. The test lasts 30 days. If you want to quit, press your emergency button and we will pick you up." Jay looked at the small red button on his wrist. All the creatures had the same button. He wondered, how many would use it before the month ended? "The planet below has many dangers," the computer continued. "The temperature changes from very hot to very cold every day. The rain will burn your skin. Wild animals hunt at night. There's very little food or clean water. Good luck." One by one, the creatures jumped from the ship. Jay watched them fall toward the planet below. Each one landed in a different place, far from the others. When his turn came, Jay took a deep breath and jumped. The wind rushed past his face as he fell. His emergency parachute opened automatically, and he drifted down toward the rocky ground. He could see the whole planet spread out below him. It looked like a dead world with no trees, no grass, and no rivers. Jay landed hard on the dusty ground. His parachute disappeared in a flash of light, taken back to the ship. Now he was alone on an alien world with nothing but his clothes. He looked around. Red rocks stuck out of the ground like broken teeth. The sky was orange and full of strange clouds. In the distance, he could see mountains that looked like they were made of glass. The air smelled like metal and made his nose burn. Jay started walking. He needed to find water first, then shelter, then food. These were the basic rules of survival that every human knew. But this planet was not like Earth. Nothing here would be easy. After an hour of walking, he found the first sign of life. Strange blue plants grew in cracks between the rocks. They had no leaves, just thick stems that oozed green liquid. Jay did not touch them. On an alien world, everything could be poison. The sun was getting lower in the sky, and Jay could already feel the temperature dropping. Soon it would be dark, and the computer had warned about night hunters. He needed shelter fast. He climbed to the top of a small hill and looked around. To the north, he saw what looked like caves in the side of a cliff. To the south, there was a dry riverbed with large rocks. To the east, the glass mountains reflected the orange sun. To the west, the ground was flat and empty. Jay decided to check the riverbed first. Rivers meant water, even if they were dry now. As he walked down the hill, he heard a sound like thunder in the distance. But there were no clouds in the sky. The riverbed was full of smooth stones and strange objects. Jay picked up a few things and looked at them carefully. Most were just rocks, but one was different. It was a large shell, bigger than his head, with sharp edges and a curved shape. It looked like it came from some kind of giant water creature. Jay held the shell in his hands and tested its weight. It was heavy, but not too heavy. The edge was sharp enough to cut, and the curved part could hold water or dirt. This was not just a shell. This was a tool. He heard the thunder sound again, closer this time. Looking up, he saw dark clouds moving fast across the sky. A computer had said the rain would burn. He needed shelter now. Jay ran toward the cliff with the caves, carrying the shell with him. But when he got there, he found that other creatures had already claimed the best spots. He could hear fighting sounds coming from inside the caves. Sharp claws scraped against rock, and angry voices echoed in the darkness. The first drops of rain began to fall. Where they hit the ground, they made small holes in the rock and sent up white smoke. Jay quickly moved under a small overhang, but it would not protect him for long. He looked at the cliff wall beside him. It was made of soft red dirt mixed with harder clay. The shell in his hand suddenly felt different. Not just like a piece, of ocean trash, but like the beginning of something bigger. While the burning rain fell harder, Jay started to dig. He used the sharp edge of the shell to cut into the soft cliff face. The dirt came away in large chunks. He worked fast, his hands already getting sore. But he did not stop. Other creatures ran past him, looking for better shelter, a tall lizard-like being with silver scales looked at Jay with yellow eyes. "Stupid human," it hissed. "Digging like a worm will not save you." Then it ran toward the caves where the fighting continued. Jay kept digging. He had made a hole big enough for his head and shoulders. The burning rain could not reach him now, but he was far from safe. The hole was too small, and the night was coming fast. He dug deeper, using the shell like a shovel. The clay layer was harder to cut, but it was also stronger. If he could dig through it, he might have a real shelter. His hands were bleeding now, but humans had been digging homes in the earth for thousands of years. This was just one more hole in one more hill. The rain stopped as suddenly as it had started. Jay crawled out of his hole and looked around. The riverbed now had small streams of the burning water running through it. The rocks where the rain had fallen were covered in white foam that smelled like poison. In the distance, he could hear the sound of the emergency buttons being pressed. Bright lights flashed in the sky as the transport ship came to pick up creatures who had given up. 3 lights flashed in the first hour. Then 2 more. Jay went back to his hole and kept digging. The shell was working better than he had hoped. Its curved shape moved dirt efficiently, and its sharp edge cut through roots and small rocks. By the time the alien sun set, he had dug a tunnel almost as long as his body. The night brought new sounds. Things howled in the darkness. Heavy footsteps walked past his hiding place. Once, he heard something sniffing at the entrance to his tunnel, but it moved on without trying to dig him out. Jay lay in his small cave, holding the shell close to his chest. Around him, 11 other creatures were trying to survive their first night on this hostile world. Some had natural advantages that humans could never match. But none of them had what Jay had, the knowledge that with enough time and the right tool, humans could build anything. Tomorrow he would dig deeper. Tomorrow he would make this hole into something better. The other creatures were trying to survive on this planet, but Jay was already planning to make it home. The second day on Keth 7 began with screaming. Jay woke up in his small tunnel as the alien sun rose, bringing harsh orange light and terrible heat. Somewhere in the distance, one of the other creatures was crying for help. Jay crawled out of his hole and stretched his sore muscles. His hands were covered in cuts from digging, but they had stopped bleeding during the night. The shell lay beside him, its edge now slightly worn from all the digging. He picked it up and felt its familiar weight in his hands. The screaming stopped suddenly. Then came the bright flash of an emergency button being pressed. Another creature had given up and called for rescue. That made 6 creatures gone in less than 24 hours. Jay looked at his tunnel. In the daylight, it looked small and rough, but it had kept him alive through the first night, and that was more than many others could say. He picked up the shell and started digging again. The work was harder in the heat. Sweat ran down his face and made the dirt stick to his skin. But Jay had learned something important during the night. The clay layer inside the cliff was perfect for building. It was soft enough to dig through, but hard enough to hold its shape. If he could dig deeper into this layer, he could make a real shelter. As he worked, he heard voices near the caves. The remaining creatures were arguing about territory. A deep voice that sounded like rocks grinding together was shouting at someone else. Then came the sound of fighting, claws against scales, and angry hissing. Jay kept digging. Let them fight over the caves. He was building something better. By noon, the temperature had become dangerous. The orange sun beat down on the rocks, making them too hot to touch. Jay had to stop digging and crawl back into his tunnel to escape the heat. Even in the shade, the air was hard to breathe. He used this time to plan. The tunnel was now deep enough for his whole body, but it was still just a hole. He needed to make it bigger. He needed rooms for sleeping, for storing food, for collecting water. Most importantly, he needed to make sure the roof would not fall down on him. Jay studied the walls of his tunnel. The clay layer ran along the cliff face like a thick stripe. If he followed this layer, he could dig sideways instead of just straight back. He could make his tunnel into an L shape, which would be stronger and give him more room. When the sun started to go down, Jay crawled out and began digging again. This time he dug to the right, following the clay layer. The shell bit into the dirt, and large chunks fell away. The work went faster now because he understood how the dirt behaved. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped quickly. Soon it was cold enough to see his breath. Jay had expected this from the computer's warning, but feeling it was different. The rocks that had been burning hot a few hours ago were now cold as ice. He heard footsteps approaching and stopped digging. A creature appeared at the edge of his tunnel, looking down at him. It was about his size but covered in thick brown fur. Its face looked almost human except for the large black eyes and pointed ears. "Human," the creature said in broken galactic standard. "I am Bach of the Hive. My people dig burrows too. But your digging is strange. Why do you go sideways?" Jay looked up at Bach. He remembered seeing this creature during the transport. The hive species were known for their tunneling abilities. They could dig faster than any machine. "The clay layer is stronger," Jay explained, pointing at the walls. "If I dig straight back, the roof might fall. If I follow the strong layer, the tunnel will last longer." Bach climbed down into the tunnel and felt the walls with his furry hands. His large eyes studied the way Jay had cut the dirt. "You understand the earth?" he said with surprise. "Most species think digging is just making holes. But you make structure. Where is your burrow?" Jay asked. Bach pointed toward the caves. "I dug under the big rocks. But the others fight above me. Their noise makes dirt fall on my head. And when the burning rain comes, it runs down into my hole." Jay nodded. He had worried about the same thing. "You need drainage," he said. "The water has to have somewhere to go, or it will fill up your home." "Drainage?" Bach looked confused. Jay used the shell to draw lines in the dirt. He showed Bach how water would flow down the cliff face and into any hole that was not properly planned. He explained how the angle of the tunnel floor could direct water away from sleeping areas. Bach listened carefully, his large eyes getting wider. "You know much about earth and water," he said finally. "May I stay here tonight?" "I will help you. Dig tomorrow." Jay was about to say yes when they heard more sounds from the caves. This time it was not fighting. It was crying. Someone was in pain. Both creatures looked toward the caves. A weak voice called out in Galactic Standard, "Help me. Please help me." Jay grabbed his shell and climbed out of the tunnel. Bach followed him. They ran across the rocky ground toward the caves, their feet crunching on the gravel. They found one of the crystal creatures sitting outside a cave, holding its arm. The creature's body was made of clear blue stone that usually glowed with inner light. But now the glow was very dim, and cracks ran through its arm like broken glass. "What happened?" Jay asked. "The lizard creature pushed me," the crystal being said weakly. "It wanted my cave. When I fell, my arm hit the rocks. I think it is broken." Jay looked at the crystal arm. He had never seen anything like it before, but a break was a break. "Can you move your fingers?" The crystal creature tried to move its hand. Small pieces of blue stone fell to the ground, and it cried out in pain. "I cannot hunt with this arm. I cannot dig. I cannot even press my emergency button." It looked up at them with sad, glowing eyes. "I will die here." Bach looked at Jay. "We should help," he said quietly. "The hive always helps injured nestmates." Jay nodded. He understood. The practical problems, too. If the crystal creature died near the caves, its body would attract scavengers. The smell would bring the night hunters closer to everyone. "Come with us," Jay said. "My tunnel is small, but it is safe. Tomorrow we can make it bigger." The crystal creature stared at him. "You would share your shelter? But I am your competition." "In this test, the test is about survival," Jay said. "Sometimes survival means working together." They helped the injured creature walk back to Jay's tunnel. Its name was Vex, and it came from a world where crystal beings lived in huge cities, made of living stone. Vex had never needed to build shelter before because its people grew their homes like plants. The three creatures squeezed into Jay's tunnel as the night hunters began to howl. It was crowded, but it was warm. Jay used dirt and small rocks too. Make a splint for Vex's broken arm. It was not perfect, but it would keep the cracks from getting worse. Thank you, Vex said, its inner light glowing a little brighter. I have energy stored in my crystal body, but I cannot hunt or gather food. How will I eat? Tomorrow we will find food together, Jay said. Tonight we just need to stay alive. As they settled down to sleep, Bach whispered to Jay, "The tunnel is too small for three creatures. Tomorrow we must dig bigger rooms." Jay smiled in the darkness. He had been thinking the same thing. The shell in his hands felt warm from all the digging. Tomorrow he would need to work twice as hard, but now he would have help. Outside, the night hunters howled again. Inside the small tunnel, three creatures from different worlds slept safely together. Above them, emergency buttons flashed in the sky as more creatures gave up and called for rescue, but Jay was not thinking about rescue anymore. He was thinking about expansion. On the third day, Jay woke up before the others. His body ached from sleeping on the hard tunnel floor, but his mind was clear. He had work to do. He crawled quietly out of the tunnel, carrying his shell. The morning air was cool and clean, a relief from the burning heat that would come later. Above him, the cliff face stretched up like a red wall, full of possibilities. Jay had spent the night thinking about architecture. Not the fancy buildings from his engineering studies, but the simple, strong structures that humans had built for thousands of years. Cave homes, underground cities, storm cellars that could last for generations. All of them started with one person, one tool, and a plan. He began digging to the left of the main tunnel, following the clay layer deeper into the cliff. The shell moved easily through the soft dirt, and he soon had the start of a new room. This would be bigger than the tunnel, with space for all three creatures to sleep comfortably. Bach woke up and crawled out to watch. His large black eyes followed Jay's movements as the human worked. "You dig differently than my people," Bach said. "We dig fast and make many small holes. You dig slow and make fewer big holes." "Different purposes," Jay explained, pausing to wipe sweat from his face. "Your people need escape routes and storage." "I am building a home," Bach nodded slowly. "A home is different from a burrow. A home is where you want to stay." "Exactly." Jay went back to digging. He was careful to keep the ceiling at the right height, and to slope the floor so water would drain out. Every few minutes, he stopped to check the walls and ceiling, making sure they were stable. Vex crawled out of the tunnel, moving carefully to protect the injured arm. The crystal creature's inner light was brighter today, but still not at full strength. "What can I do to help?" Vex asked. Jay looked at the crystal creature thoughtfully. "Can you see in the dark?" "Yes, my people produce light from our bodies. I can see clearly even in deep tunnels." "Good. I need someone to watch for cracks in the ceiling while I dig. If you see any lines or loose dirt, tell me immediately." Vex nodded and positioned itself where it could watch the ceiling of the new room. Its blue light made the work easier, and Jay could see the different layers of dirt and clay more clearly. As the day grew hotter, more creatures appeared near the tunnel. Word was spreading that the human had built something stable and that he was willing to share it. A tall reptile creature with silver scales stood at the edge of the digging site, watching with yellow eyes. "I am Thal," the reptile said in a deep voice. "I heard you help wounded creatures." Jay looked up from his digging. Thal was one of the saurids, a species known for being fierce hunters. But this one looked tired and thin. Its scales were dull, and its movements were slow. "What do you need?" Jay asked. "I have not eaten in 2 days," Thal admitted. "The small animals here are too fast for me, and the plants make me sick. I am a good hunter on my homeworld, but this place is different." Bach looked at Jay with questioning eyes. They had barely enough food for 3 creatures, and now a 4th wanted to join them. On Bach's world, extra mouths meant less food for everyone, but Jay was thinking about different problems. "What can you hunt?" he asked Thal. "I am strong," Thal replied. "I can catch large prey if I can get close enough. But I need help finding them." Jay nodded. We need protein and you need food. Tonight, when the hunters come out, you can catch one of them instead of hiding from them. Thal's eyes widened. You want me to hunt the night creatures? Why not? They hunt us every night. Time to turn the tables. Bulk chittered with excitement. Human thinking is strange but clever. Use the dangerous things as resources instead of just avoiding them. While they talked, Jay kept digging. The new room was taking shape, with walls that curved smoothly into the ceiling. He had learned this technique from studying ancient human buildings. Curved ceilings were stronger than flat ones, and they distributed weight better. By midday, the room was large enough for all 4 creatures to sit together. But Jay was not finished. He started digging a 3rd chamber, this one smaller and deeper. This would be for food storage, where the temperature would stay cool even during the hottest part of the day. Why do you need so many rooms? Vex asked. Still watching for ceiling cracks. Specialization, Jay said. 1 room for sleeping, 1 for living, 1 for storage. Each room does its job better when it is designed for that job only. Vex's light flickered with what might have been amusement. You think like my people do about crystal growth. Each part of the structure has its purpose. As the afternoon wore on, other creatures began to visit. Some came to ask for help, others just to see what the human was building. A few tried to demand entry, but Thal's presence discouraged them from pushing too hard. One visitor was different from the others. It was small and round, covered in soft gray fur, with 6 arms and large, gentle eyes. It spoke in a high, musical voice. I am Myra, it said. I come from the gentle people. We do not fight or hunt. We only gather plants and heal injuries. May I trade with you? Jay stopped digging and looked at the small creature. What do you have to trade? Myra opened a small pouch and showed them seeds, roots, and dried plant matter. I have been gathering food since I arrived. These plants are safe to eat. These ones can heal cuts and bruises. These seeds will grow into food plants if you plant them in good soil. Jay's eyes lit up. You have seeds? Many seeds. But I have no shelter. The caves are full of fighting creatures, and I cannot dig like you do. Jay looked at his growing tunnel system, then at the trade goods in Myra's pouch. Seeds meant future food, healing plants meant better health, and another pair of hands meant faster digging. Welcome to our home, he said. By evening, 5 creatures lived in Jay's underground complex. The main tunnel now connected 3 rooms, with a 4th chamber planned for the next day. Balk had helped expand the sleeping chamber using his natural digging skills to smooth the walls and reinforce weak spots. Vex provided light and watched for structural problems. Thal prepared for the night hunt, stretching his muscles and testing his claws. Myra sorted through her collection of plants, explaining which ones were food and which ones were medicine, and Jay kept digging. The shell in his hands was now worn smooth from constant use, but it still worked perfectly. He had used it to dig out hundreds of pounds of dirt and clay. His hands were tough and calloused, and his arms were stronger than they had been when he first landed on this planet. As darkness fell, they heard the familiar sounds of night hunters approaching. But tonight was different. Instead of hiding and hoping the hunters would pass by, Thal positioned himself at the tunnel entrance with a plan. Remember, Jay said quietly, we only need one. Do not take unnecessary risks. Thal nodded, his yellow eyes glowing in the darkness. I understand. Hunt smart, not hard. The first hunter appeared an hour after sunset. It was a creature like a giant spider, but with armor plates and venomous fangs. It approached the tunnel entrance carefully, sensing that something was different. Thal struck fast and precisely, using the narrow tunnel entrance to limit the creature's movement. Within minutes it was over. They had fresh meat, and Thal had proven his worth to the group. As they cooked the meat over a small fire deep in the tunnel, Jay looked at his companions. 5 creatures from 5 different worlds working together. In a home that he had built with nothing but a shell and determination. Outside, emergency buttons continued to flash as more creatures gave up and called for rescue. But inside the underground complex, 5 very different beings shared a meal and planned for tomorrow's expansion. Jay was not just surviving anymore. He was building a community. The fourth day began with the sound of scraping. Jay was already at work before dawn, using his shell to carve a narrow channel along the tunnel floor. Water from the night's condensation was pooling in the low spots, and he needed to direct it outside before it became a problem. Bach watched him work with fascination. "You think about water like my people think about air," the hive creature said, "always planning where it will go next." "Water always wins eventually," Jay replied, scraping away another handful of dirt. "Better to work with it than against it." The channel was a simple thing, just a shallow groove that sloped gently downward toward the tunnel entrance. But it solved a problem that could have become serious later. Jay had seen too many human structures fail because their builders ignored. Water management. Vex emerged from the sleeping chamber, moving more easily now that its arm was healing. The crystal creature's inner light was almost back to full brightness, casting blue shadows on the tunnel walls. "The overhead watchers have noticed our home," Vex announced. Jay looked up. Through the tunnel entrance he could see a small flying device hovering in the distance. It was one of the observation drones that the Galactic Council used to monitor the test. "Let them watch," he said, and went back to work. The underground complex had grown significantly since the first night. What had started as a simple hole now included 4 connected chambers, the original tunnel entry, a large living space, a sleeping chamber, and a cool storage room. But Jay had bigger plans for today. He began digging a 5th chamber, this one, designed for a specific purpose. It would be the workshop, a place where they could make tools and prepare food. The location was important. It needed to be far enough from the sleeping area to avoid disturbing anyone, but close enough to the storage room for easy access to materials. Myra appeared with her daily collection of plants and roots. The small creature had become their expert forager, finding food sources that others had missed. Today she carried something new, long, flexible vines that she had discovered growing deep in the riverbed caves. "These vines are very strong," she explained, showing them to Jay. "My people use similar plants for weaving and building. Perhaps they could be useful here." Jay examined the vines carefully. They were indeed strong, with a fibrous texture that reminded him of rope. An idea began to form in his mind. "Perfect," he said. "We can use these for reinforcement." He showed the others how to weave the vines through small holes in the tunnel walls, creating a network of support that would prevent cave-ins. It was an old human technique, used in mines and underground bunkers. The vines would dry and become even stronger. Over time, Thao returned from his morning patrol with news. 3 more creatures called for rescue during the night, the Saurid reported. "Only 4 remain in the caves, and they are fighting over the last good spaces." Jay nodded but kept working. He was not surprised. The caves had seemed like the obvious choice for shelter, but they were too small and too close together. Creatures that were used to large territories could not share such cramped spaces peacefully. As the morning progressed, the observation drone moved closer. It hovered just outside the tunnel entrance, its sensors scanning everything. Jay could hear the high-pitched whine of its recording devices. "Does it bother you?" Vex asked, noticing Jay's glance at the drone. "No," Jay said honestly. "Let them see what we are building. Maybe they will learn something." By midday, the workshop chamber was complete. It was not large, but it had everything they needed: a flat work surface carved from the solid clay, storage niches for tools and materials, and good ventilation to carry away smoke from their cooking fire. Jay used his shell to carve a series of shallow bowls and channels in the workshop floor. These would collect water for washing and for mixing clay into pottery. He had not made pottery since his school days, but the principles were simple enough. The others watched him work with growing amazement. What had seemed like random digging was actually precise engineering. Every cut had a purpose. Every chamber was positioned for maximum efficiency. "How do you know all of this?" Bach asked. "Did humans teach you these techniques?" "Some of it," Jay said, taking a break to drink water from their collection system. "But mostly I am just thinking about what we need and how to provide it." He pointed to the sleeping chamber. "We need a place to rest that is quiet and comfortable." So I made that room away from the main traffic areas, with soft dirt on the floor and curved walls that do not echo. He pointed to the storage room. We need to keep food cool and safe from insects. So I dug that room deep and narrow, where the temperature stays constant. He pointed to the workshop. We need a place to work on projects without disturbing others. So I put that room between the living space and the storage, where it is convenient but not central. Vex's light pulsed thoughtfully. You design each space for its function. This is very sophisticated thinking. It is just common sense, Jay said, but even as he said it, he realized that what seemed obvious to him was not obvious to the others. They were all intelligent creatures, but they thought about space differently than humans did. In the afternoon, Jay started his most ambitious project yet. Using measurements he had scratched on the tunnel walls, he began digging an entrance to a sixth chamber. This one would be different from all the others. What is this room for? Myra asked, watching him work. Farming? Jay replied. The others looked confused. Farming meant growing plants, but they were underground. How could plants grow without sunlight? Jay explained his plan. The new chamber would be directly under a thin section of the cliff face. If he dug carefully, he could create a shaft that would let in light from above. Not direct sunlight, which would be too intense, but reflected light that would be perfect for growing plants. The shaft will also bring in fresh air, he added, and provide emergency ventilation if our main entrance becomes blocked. Myra clapped her 6 hands together with excitement. If we can grow food underground, we will never go hungry. The work was delicate. Jay had to dig straight up, making sure the shaft was wide enough for light but narrow enough to maintain structural integrity. He used the vines to reinforce the walls as he went, creating a strong framework that would prevent collapse. As evening approached, the observation drone finally moved away. But Jay noticed something interesting. It was replaced by a larger drone, one with more sophisticated sensors and recording equipment. The Galactic Council was paying serious attention to what he was building. That night, as they gathered in the main living chamber for dinner, Thal brought news from the outside world. The creatures in the caves are talking about joining us, he reported. They say our home is the only safe place left on this planet. Jay considered this. The underground complex could probably support a few more inhabitants, but only if they were willing to work and contribute. And only if they could accept his leadership. What do you think? He asked the others. We have plenty of food, Myra said. I find more plants every day. The tunnels can be expanded, Bach added. More diggers would make the work go faster. More hunters would make us safer, Thal pointed out. And some of those creatures have useful skills. Vex pulsed with thoughtful light. Your human methods work because you plan everything carefully. If we accept new members, they must understand that this is not just a shelter. This is a community with rules. Jay nodded. That was exactly what he had been thinking. The underground complex was not just a place to hide from the planet's dangers. It was becoming something more, a functioning society with specialized roles and shared responsibilities. As they settled down for the night, Jay looked around at what they had accomplished. In 4 days, using nothing but a discarded shell and human engineering knowledge, he had created a multi-room underground facility that could support a dozen creatures in comfort. But more than that, he had brought together 5 very different beings and shown them how to work as a team. Each creature contributed according to its abilities, and all of them benefited from the shared effort. Outside, the night hunters howled and searched for prey. Inside the underground complex, 5 creatures from 5 different worlds slept safely in rooms designed specifically for rest and recovery. The shell lay beside Jay's sleeping spot, worn smooth from constant use but still sharp enough to cut through the toughest clay. Tomorrow he would use it to dig the farming chamber's light shaft. Tomorrow the community would grow larger and stronger. The test was supposed to be about individual survival, but Jay was proving something different. He was proving that humans did not just survive. They built civilizations. The morning of the 5th day brought visitors. Not the usual desperate creatures seeking shelter, but something far more official. A team of Galactic Council inspectors landed near the cliff face. their uniforms clean and their equipment expensive. Jay was working on the light shaft when he heard their voices outside. He paused in his digging and listened to their conversation. According to our drones, the human subject has been excavating in this area, one inspector said in a bored tone. Probably just a simple burrow like the other primitive species. The energy readings suggest something larger, another voice replied. We should investigate to confirm our survival assessments. Jay smiled to himself. Let them investigate. He was proud of what they had built. The first inspector appeared at the tunnel entrance and stopped in surprise. Instead of a crude hole in the ground, he found himself looking at a carefully carved archway with smooth walls and proper drainage channels. This is unexpected, the inspector muttered, pulling out a scanning device. Jay emerged from the light shaft tunnel, covered in dirt but grinning. Welcome to our home, he said politely. Would you like a tour? The inspectors exchanged glances. Their job was to observe, not interact, but they were clearly curious about what they had found. The lead inspector, a tall creature with blue skin and 4 arms, stepped forward. I am Inspector Crowell, he announced. We are here to assess your survival status. This appears to be more than a simple shelter. It is, Jay agreed. Come inside and see for yourself. He led them through the main entrance tunnel, pointing out the drainage system, the vine reinforcements, and the careful way each surface had been finished smooth. The inspectors followed silently, their scanning devices recording everything. They entered the main living chamber, and Crowell stopped completely. The room was large enough for a dozen creatures to gather comfortably. The ceiling was a perfect arch, strong and beautiful. Carved niches held their tools and supplies. A central fire pit provided warmth and cooking capability, with a chimney system that vented smoke through carefully designed channels. This is impossible, one inspector whispered. The human had no tools except basic clothing. Jay held up his shell. I had this. Everything else we made ourselves. Vex appeared from the sleeping chamber, its crystal body glowing with warm light. Good morning, inspectors. Would you like to see our workshop? Before the inspectors could answer, Vex led them to the next chamber. Here they found carved work surfaces, organized tool storage, and even primitive pottery that Myra had shaped from the local clay. Water collection bowls caught condensation from the walls, providing a constant supply of clean drinking water. Remarkable, Crowell murmured, running one of his 4 hands along the smooth wall surface. The precision of these cuts suggests advanced cutting tools, but our scans show no metal or energy signatures. Everything was done by hand, Bach explained, appearing from the storage chamber. Jay taught us how to work with the earth instead of fighting against it. The tour continued. The inspectors saw the food storage room with its constant cool temperature and protective alcoves. They examined the sleeping chamber with its curved walls and soft earthen floors. They watched Myra demonstrate the organization of her plant, collection, and medical supplies. But the biggest surprise came when Jay led them to the newest addition, the farming chamber. The light shaft was complete, bringing filtered sunlight down into the underground space. Myra had already planted the first seeds in carefully prepared soil beds. A complex irrigation system used collected rainwater to keep the plants moist without causing flooding. You are growing food, Inspector Crowell said slowly, underground, without technology. Plants do not care whether they are above ground or below ground, Jay explained. They just need light, water, nutrients, and proper drainage. We provide all of those things. Thal joined them, carrying fresh meat from his morning hunt. The human also taught us to work together, the Sword said. I hunt, Bach digs, Vex provides light, Myra finds plants. Each creature does what it does best. And what does the human do best? Crowell asked. Planning. All 4 creatures said at the same time. The inspectors spent 2 hours examining every part of the underground complex. They measured rooms, tested structural integrity, and analyzed the engineering principles behind each design. Choice. Their scanning devices recorded everything from drainage angles to air circulation patterns. Finally, Crowell turned to Jay with a puzzled expression. According to our measurements, this facility could house 15 to 20 creatures in reasonable comfort. It has food production, water collection, waste management, climate control, and defensive advantages. You have essentially built a small city. Not a city, Jay corrected. A home. But why? Another inspector asked. The test requires only basic survival. You could have simply hidden in a cave for 30 days. Jay looked around at his companions, then back at the inspectors. Hiding is not surviving. Surviving means building something better than what you started with. The inspectors left shortly afterward, their heads full of questions and their equipment full of data. As soon as they were gone, Jay gathered his companions in the main living chamber. They will report what they saw to the Galactic Council, he said. That might change how the test is evaluated. Does that worry you? Vex asked. No, Jay replied honestly. We built this place to survive on a hostile planet. If the Council wants to change the test because we succeeded too well, that is their problem. As if summoned by his words, 3 more creatures appeared at the tunnel entrance. They were the last survivors from the caves. Finally driven out by fighting and structural collapses, one was an insect-like creature with iridescent wings and compound eyes. Another was covered in thick white fur and walked on 6 legs. The third was tall and thin, with skin that changed colors like a chameleon. We heard about your community, the insect creature said hesitantly. We were wondering ... could we join you? Jay looked at the 3 newcomers, then at his existing companions. The underground complex could easily house 8 creatures, but only if everyone worked together. What can you contribute? He asked. The insect creature, who introduced herself as Zara, could fly and scout for dangers or resources. The furry creature named Paul was incredibly strong and could move heavy objects. The color-changing creature called Finn could blend into any environment and was an excellent tracker. We follow the community rules, Jay explained. Everyone works, everyone contributes, everyone benefits. No fighting over territory, no hoarding of resources. We make decisions together, but in emergencies I have final authority. All 3 newcomers agreed immediately. After days of cold, hunger, and constant danger, the warm underground complex seemed like paradise. That evening, 8 creatures from 6 different worlds shared dinner in the main living chamber. The room was full but not crowded, and conversation flowed in a mix of languages and translation devices. After the meal, Jay stood up to address the group. Tomorrow we start the 2nd phase of construction, he announced. We need individual sleeping alcoves for privacy, a larger workshop for manufacturing, and an expanded farming area for more food production. How much larger do you want to make this place? Bach asked. Jay looked around at the faces surrounding him, scales and fur, Crystal and Chiton all watching him with trust and anticipation. Large enough for anyone who wants to build instead of just survive. Outside, the observation drones recorded everything. Inside the underground complex that had started as a simple hole dug with a discarded shell, 8 creatures from across the galaxy planned their shared future. The test had asked them to survive for 30 days on a hostile planet with no tools and no shelter. But Jay had proven something the test makers never expected. Given enough time and the right leadership, any group of creatures could build a civilization. The only question now was how big that civilization would grow. Word traveled fast across the galaxy. By the 6th day of the test, news of the humans' underground city had reached the highest levels of the Galactic Council. Emergency sessions were called. Experts were consulted. Some council members demanded immediate intervention, while others argued for letting the test continue. Jay knew none of this as he worked on expanding the sleeping quarters. The original sleeping chamber had been fine for 5 creatures, but 8 needed more space and privacy. He was carving individual alcoves into the walls, each one sized for its intended occupant. Zara, the insect creature, needed a high alcove where she could hang from the ceiling. Paul, the furry creature, needed extra width for his bulk. Finn, the color changer, preferred a narrow space where he could feel secure on all sides. Each alcove was different, but all were connected to the main chamber for warmth and safety. You think about individual needs while building for the group, Finn observed, watching Jay work. This is unusual thinking. Different creatures have different requirements, Jay replied, using his worn shell to smooth the walls of Paul's alcove. A good community adapts to serve everyone. As Jay worked, the others had taken on new responsibilities. Buck was leading an expansion of the workshop, creating specialized areas for different types of manufacturing. Vex was experimenting with growing crystal formations for tools and decoration. Myra had established a systematic farming operation that was already producing fresh vegetables. Thal had become their defense coordinator, establishing patrol routes and early warning systems. The night hunters were learning to avoid their area, but other dangers still existed. The most impressive development was their water management system. What had started as simple drainage channels had evolved into a complex network of collection, filtration, and distribution. They now had running water throughout the complex, using gravity and careful engineering to move clean water to where it was needed. Around midday, they received another official visit. This time it was not just inspectors but a full diplomatic team led by Counselor Yex, one of the most senior members of the galactic government. Counselor Yex was a crystalline being like Vex, but much larger and more elaborate. Its body was made of deep purple stone that pulsed with inner light, and it spoke with the authority of someone used to being obeyed. Human J, Counselor Yex announced formally, I have come to observe your construction project. Jay set down his shell and brushed dirt from his hands. Welcome, Counselor. Would you like to see what we have built? The tour that followed was more detailed than the previous inspection. Counselor Yex examined every aspect of the underground complex, from the structural engineering to the social organization. The other creatures proudly explained their roles and showed off their contributions. In the farming chamber, Myra demonstrated how they had created artificial soil using composted organic matter and carefully selected minerals. Small plants were already growing under the filtered sunlight from the shaft above. In the workshop, Balk showed off the tools they had made from salvaged materials and shaped clay. Stone knives, wooden handles, rope woven from plant fibers. Everything they needed for more complex construction. In the living chamber, the group demonstrated their decision-making process. When a question arose about expanding the water system, they discussed options openly, with each creature contributing ideas based on their expertise. Remarkable, Counselor Yex said finally. You have created a functional society with defined roles, shared resources, and collaborative governance, all in less than a week. We had good raw materials to work with, Jay said, gesturing to his companions. Everyone here brings useful skills and knowledge, but you provided the organizational framework, the counselor observed. Without your leadership, these creatures would likely have remained competitors rather than collaborators. Jay thought about that. It was true that he had initiated most of the construction and established the community rules. But the others had quickly taken ownership of their roles and begun contributing their own innovations. Leadership is just getting things started, he said. After that, it is about making sure everyone can contribute their best work. Counselor Yex spent the afternoon observing their daily routines. He watched Zara return from a scouting flight, with news about weather patterns and resource locations. He saw Paul easily move massive stones that would have required multiple creatures to handle. He observed Finn track the movement of potentially dangerous animals around their territory. Each creature was doing what they did best, but all their efforts were coordinated toward common goals. It was, the counselor realized, a perfect example of efficient resource allocation and cooperative problem-solving. That evening, as the community gathered for dinner, Counselor Yex asked to address the group. I have observed many civilizations across the galaxy, he began. Most take centuries or millennia to develop the level of cooperation and organization I have seen here today. You have accomplished this in less than a week. Vex's light pulsed with pride. Jay showed us how to work together instead of against each other. But each of you chose to participate, the counselor pointed out. You could have remained competitors. You could have built separate shelters and fought over resources. Instead, you chose cooperation. Cooperation works better, Paul said simply. More food, better shelter, safer living. Why would we choose the harder way? Counselor Yex looked thoughtful. On most worlds, creatures choose the harder way because they do not trust others to share fairly. How did you overcome this problem? Simple rules fairly applied, Jay answered. Everyone works, everyone contributes, everyone benefits. No exceptions, no special treatment, and if someone breaks the rules? The group exchanged glances. They had not actually faced this problem yet, but they had discussed it. First time, we talk about it and try to fix the problem, Val said. Second time, reduce privileges until behavior improves. Third time, they leave the community. Has anyone been asked to leave? No, Myra said. When everyone benefits from cooperation, there is no reason to cause problems. After dinner, Counselor Yex took Jay aside for a private conversation. They walked to the tunnel entrance and looked out at the harsh landscape beyond. The Galactic Council is debating whether to end this test early, the counselor said quietly. Some members believe you have exceeded the parameters and invalidated the results. Have we broken any rules? Jay asked. No, the test specifies no tools, no shelter materials, no technology. You have followed all restrictions. But the test was designed to measure individual survival capability, not community building skills. Jay nodded. He had suspected this might become an issue. What do you think should happen? Counselor Yex was quiet for a long moment, his purple crystal body pulsing with slow light. I think the test has revealed something more important than individual survival capability. It has shown us what is possible when different species work together under proper leadership. So the test continues? The test continues, but it is no longer just about survival. It has become about something much more significant. As the counselor's transport departed, Jay rejoined his companions in the main living chamber. They were planning tomorrow's projects, expanding the farming operation, improving the workshop capabilities, and beginning construction of a second entrance for better security. What did the counselor want? Bach asked. To understand what we are building here, Jay replied. I think he got his answer. That night, as 8 creatures from 6 worlds settled into their individual sleeping alcoves, Jay lay awake thinking. The shell that had started everything was now just one tool among many. They had made knives, hammers, digging sticks, and measuring devices. The simple shelter had become a complex facility with specialized rooms and sophisticated systems, but the most important change was not in the technology or the architecture. It was in the relationships between the creatures who lived here. They had stopped being competitors and become collaborators. They had stopped thinking about individual survival and started thinking about community success. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. But tonight, in an underground complex that had started as a desperate hole in the ground, 8 very different creatures slept safely together as neighbors, friends, and family. The test was supposed to measure how well individual species could survive alone. Instead, it was proving how much better they could all survive together. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been going on for 3 days. Representatives from 12 major species sat around a circular table that floated in space above the capital world. Outside the transparent walls, stars wheeled slowly in their ancient patterns, but inside the atmosphere was tense with debate. The human has violated the spirit of the test, declared Senator Vorthak, a massive creature covered in armored plates. The challenge was designed to measure individual survival capability. Instead, he has created a collective that undermines the entire purpose. He has broken no rules, countered Counselor Yex, his purple crystal body pulsing with calm light. The test parameters were clear: no tools, no shelter materials, no technology. Everything they have built uses only materials found on the planet. Senator Nyx, a floating jellyfish-like being, rippled with agitation. But look at what they have accomplished. Underground chambers, farming systems, manufacturing capabilities. This is not survival. This is colonization. Back on Keth 7, Jay was unaware of the political storm he had created. He was focused on a new problem. Their success was attracting attention from unexpected sources. Ship signatures on the horizon, Zara reported, returning from her morning scout flight. 3 vessels, different designs. They are landing about 5 kilometers away. Jay looked up from his work on the new entrance tunnel. Council ships? No, Zara said, her compound eyes reflecting worry. These ships look unofficial. Thal emerged from the main tunnel, his scales bristling with alertness. I smell something wrong on the wind, not natural smells. Chemical traces, weapon residue? The group gathered in the main living chamber for an emergency meeting. Through their network of observation posts, they had been tracking the new arrivals. The ships had landed in a rough triangle around their location, suggesting coordinated action. Bounty hunters, Finn said grimly, his skin shifting to dark camouflage colors. I have seen this pattern before. They surround the target, then close. In from all directions, bounty hunters? Vex's light flickered with confusion. But we are participating in an official council test. We are under diplomatic protection. Paul growled deep in his throat, a sound like rocks grinding together. Some people do not care about diplomatic protection when there is enough money involved. Jay felt a chill that had nothing to do with the underground temperature. What would bounty hunters want with us? Think about it, Thal said seriously. 8 creatures from 6 different species working together perfectly, sharing advanced survival techniques. Some governments would pay a lot to capture us and study how this cooperation was achieved. Myra's 6 arms trembled with fear. My people are pacifists. We have no weapons, no military training. If hunters come for us, they will not reach you, Jay said firmly. We have advantages they do not expect. He was right. The underground complex had been designed with defense in mind, though more for protection against wild animals than organized attackers. The main entrance was narrow and easily defended. The second entrance was hidden and could serve as an escape route. The internal layout created choke points where a few defenders could hold off larger numbers. More importantly, they had 8 different sets of abilities working in perfect coordination. Jay quickly organized their defense. Zara would provide aerial reconnaissance and early warning. Finn would use his camouflage abilities to gather intelligence on the attackers. Thal and Paul would handle direct combat if necessary. Bach would prepare the tunnels for siege conditions. Vex would provide light and communication support. Myra would prepare medical supplies and emergency food supplies, and Jay would coordinate everything from the central command position they had established in the main living chamber. The first attack came at sunset. 3 groups of bounty hunters approached from different directions, just as Finn had predicted. But instead of finding helpless test subjects hiding in caves, they found something completely unexpected. The narrow tunnel entrance became a fatal bottleneck. Attackers could only enter one at a time, and they immediately faced Thal's claws and Paul's massive strength in the confined space. The smooth tunnel walls offered no handholds for climbing, and the carefully designed angles created perfect defensive positions above ground. Zara dive-bombed the hunters with rocks and debris, using her flight advantage to stay out of reach while disrupting their coordination. Finn appeared and disappeared like a ghost, causing confusion and panic among creatures who could not track his movements. The bounty hunters had come expecting to capture primitive survivors. Instead, they found themselves facing a coordinated defense system designed by military engineering principles and executed by 8 different specialists working as a single unit. The attack failed completely. Within 2 hours, the surviving hunters were retreating to their ships, leaving behind equipment and wounded companions. They had never encountered anything like the underground fortress or the level of cooperation they faced. As the hunter ships departed, Jay gathered his community in the main chamber. Everyone was safe, but the implications of the attack were troubling. They will be back, Thal said grimly, with more hunters and better equipment. Or they will sell information about us to governments or corporations, Vex added. Either way, we have become valuable targets. Jay looked around at his companions. In 9 days, they had built something remarkable together. But their success had made them famous across the galaxy, and fame brought dangers they had never anticipated. "We have a choice," he said slowly. "We can call for emergency extraction and return to our homeworlds. The test is officially over. For us, we have proven we can survive." He paused, meeting each creature's eyes in turn. "Or we can stay and build something permanent, not just a survival shelter, but a real settlement. A place where different species can live and work together as equals." The discussion that followed lasted deep into the night. Each creature had to weigh the safety of returning home against the possibility of creating something completely new. Myra spoke first. "My people have always been peaceful, but we have also always been weak. Here, working with all of you, I feel strong for the first time in my life." Paul nodded his massive head. "On my world, strength is everything. But here I have learned that cooperation is stronger than any individual power." Zara's wings buzzed with excitement. "The things we have built together are better than anything my species has achieved alone. I want to see what else is possible." One by one, each creature made the same choice. They would stay on Keth 7 and build a permanent settlement. Not because they had to, for the test, but because they wanted to, for themselves. Jay felt a surge of pride and responsibility. What had started as a desperate attempt to survive had become something much more significant. They were no longer test subjects or competitors. They were colonists, pioneers building the first truly integrated multi-species community in galactic history. But as they made their plans for permanent settlement, none of them knew about the heated debates happening in the Galactic Council, chambers far above them. "This changes everything," Senator Vorthak was saying to the assembled representatives. "If one human can unite multiple species this effectively, what does that mean for the balance of power in the galaxy?" "It means," Councillor Yex replied calmly, "that we have been thinking about cooperation in entirely the wrong way. Perhaps it is time to learn from them instead of fearing them." The debate continued, but far below on the surface of Keth 7. 8 creatures from 6 worlds were no longer concerned with galactic politics. They had found something more valuable than individual survival or species advantage. They had found home. 6 months later, the settlement on Keth 7 bore little resemblance to the desperate hole that Jay had first carved with a discarded shell. What had begun as emergency shelter had grown into a thriving underground city that housed over 200 creatures from 30 different species. The original tunnels now served as the historical center of New Harmony, as the settlement had come to be called. Visitors could tour the preserved chambers where Jay had first demonstrated that cooperation could overcome any challenge. The worn shell that had started everything was displayed in a place of honor. Though Jay still sometimes borrowed it for demonstration purposes, Nari stood at the entrance to the main settlement, reading from a datapad as she prepared for another day of interviews. As the first official ambassador to New Harmony, she had been documenting the settlement's growth and studying its social structures for the past 3 months. "Population today is 212, she noted to her recording. "Device, representing 31 different species from across the galaxy. No violent incidents in 47 days. Resource distribution efficiency at 96%. Medical facilities now include specialists for 15 different biological types." She looked up as Jay approached from the agricultural complex, his hands dirty from working in the expanded underground farms. He looked older than when she had first met him, but healthier and more confident. "Another delegation arriving today?" he asked, noticing the formal clothes she wore for meeting with official visitors. 3, actually, Nari replied. "The Andromedan Trade Collective wants to establish a permanent trade relationship. The Zeta Reticuli Research Institute wants to study our social dynamics. And the Galactic Council is sending another evaluation team," Jay smiled. "The Council. Teams are getting friendlier. The first few were convinced we were some kind of dangerous experiment." That was true. In the early months after the test ended, the Galactic Council had sent increasingly large inspection teams to study New Harmony. Some had come with suspicion, expecting to find evidence of coercion or artificial social engineering. Others had come with fear, worried that human leadership methods represented a threat to established galactic order. All of them had left confused and impressed. The settlement worked because it was built on principles that seemed obvious once explained, but which no other species had successfully implemented on such a scale. Individual skills were valued and developed, but always in service of community goals. Resources were shared according to need, but contribution was expected from everyone according to their abilities. Decisions were made collectively, but with clear leadership during emergencies. Most importantly, the settlement grew organically. New arrivals were not forced to assimilate into an existing culture, but were encouraged to contribute their own traditions and knowledge to an ever-evolving community. "Where is the morning planning meeting?" Nari asked. "Main assembly chamber," Jay replied. "We are discussing the expansion into the southern caverns." The assembly chamber was a vast underground space that had been carved out as the settlement grew. Natural light filtered down through carefully engineered shafts, and the walls were decorated with artwork from dozens of different species. It could hold 500 creatures comfortably, though today only about 50 were present for the planning session. Jay took his place at the central podium, but as always, he was just one voice among many. The settlement had evolved beyond needing a single leader, though his opinions still carried special weight due to his role as founder. Bach stood up to present the engineering report. His hive people had become the master builders of New Harmony, using their natural digging abilities enhanced by human architectural principles. "The southern cavern system is stable and suitable for development," he announced. "We can connect it to the main settlement within 2 weeks. Estimated capacity, 300 additional residents with full facilities." Vex added the resource. "Analysis. Material requirements are well within our production capabilities. The new crystal-growing chambers can provide all necessary lighting and structural support." Paul reported on security considerations. "Perimeter defenses can be extended to cover the new area. No significant increase in vulnerability to outside threats." Myra discussed environmental impact. "The expansion will not disturb the native ecosystem. Local plant and animal populations have actually increased since we established our careful resource management protocols." Other voices joined the discussion. Trade representatives talked about increased capacity for manufacturing and commerce. Teachers discussed plans for educational facilities. Medical staff outlined expanded treatment capabilities, but perhaps the most interesting contribution came from the newest arrivals, a group of young creatures from various species, who had been born since the settlement was established. They had grown up in an environment where cooperation between species was normal, and their perspectives were often strikingly different from their parents. A young saurid named Kex stood up to address the assembly. "The adults always talk about different species learning to work together," she said in a clear voice, "but we do not see different species. We just see neighbors and friends." The chamber fell silent. Kex was only 5 years old, but she had identified something profound that the adults sometimes missed. For the children of New Harmony, the settlement was not an experiment in interspecies cooperation. It was simply home, after the planning meeting. Jay walked with Nari through the expanded settlement. They passed workshops where creatures with different natural abilities collaborated on complex manufacturing projects. They visited classrooms where young beings learned mathematics, science, and philosophy from teachers of multiple species. They stopped at medical facilities where doctors had developed new treatments by combining knowledge from across the galaxy. "The council evaluation teams always ask the same question," Nari said as they walked. "They want to know how you did. How you convince so many different species to work together when their home governments cannot even negotiate simple trade agreements." Jay considered the question. He had been asked it hundreds of times by researchers, diplomats, and journalists. The answer was always the same, but people rarely seemed satisfied with its simplicity. "I did not convince anyone of anything," he said finally. I just provided an environment where cooperation was more profitable than competition. Once creatures see the benefits of working together, they choose to continue doing it. They reached the Memorial Garden, a peaceful space dedicated to the creatures who had died during the original survival test. 7 names were carved into crystal monuments that caught and reflected the filtered sunlight from above. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had just hidden in a cave? For 30 days? Nari asked. J looked at the bustling settlement around them, then at the names of the creatures who had not survived to see what they had built together. Every human wonders about roads not taken, he said. But I do not regret the choice we made. Building something is always better than just surviving. That evening, as the settlement's lights began to glow in the gathering darkness, Jay found himself back in the original tunnel where everything had started. The walls were smooth now, reinforced and decorated, but the basic structure remained. Unchanged. He picked up the old shell and held it in his hands, feeling its familiar weight and the worn spots where his fingers had gripped it during those first desperate days. It was just a piece of ocean debris, but it had become something more, a symbol of what was possible when necessity, imagination, and determination came together. Young creatures often asked him why he had kept digging when a simple cave would have provided adequate shelter. The answer was complicated and simple at the same time. Humans, he had learned, were not particularly strong or fast or intelligent compared to other species. But they had one unique characteristic: they could not be satisfied with just surviving. Given any challenge, humans would always try to build something better than what they started with. The survival test had been designed to measure individual capability under stress. But it had accidentally revealed something more important, that the greatest human strength was not individual at all. It was the ability to bring out the best in others and unite them toward common goals. As he prepared for sleep in his comfortable quarters in the heart of New Harmony, Jay thought about tomorrow's challenges. New delegations to meet, expansion projects to supervise, and the endless work of building a community that served all its members. But tonight, 212 creatures from 31 different worlds would sleep safely and comfortably in homes they had built together. Children would dream of futures where cooperation was normal and conflict was rare. Adults would wake up looking forward to another day of meaningful work alongside trusted friends. The test was long over, but the experiment continued. Every day brought new proof that different species could not only survive together, but thrive together. Every new arrival added their knowledge and skills to the growing community. Every successful project demonstrated again that cooperation was stronger than any individual capability. Somewhere in the galaxy, the Galactic Council continued to debate the implications of New Harmony. Some saw it as a model for the future, others as a